What's up, everybody? Doug here, and we have got part three of the handheld gaming series today. Uh, Before we get into it, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that came out to the August 2nd and 3rd shows. By the time it'll come out, that it'll be too late by the time it comes out. But I'll be playing again in Carthage this weekend, and I'm super excited to do that. I'm going to be getting a lot of time to catch up on podcasts on the drive up there. Get a little sip of that strawberry starburst C4 drink. Uh, but then September 1st, I'll be playing at Low Tides in Bridge City. And then I can't remember I think it's like, it's in the 20th. I'm playing again at LaBerge, but I don't know the details on that one yet. Uh, all that being said, if you haven't listened to the first two episodes of the Handheld Gaming Review Series, go check those out now. That this series has been such a fun thing to make, and I'm super happy to have been able to have done it. Also, we have our reviews of Primal Survivors, Shift 87, and Reveal out. That was a fun episode as well. And if you want to get the written reviews of that, you can go over to our WordPress page, which I was a little dummy and did not put that on the run of show, the link, but you can find it. I'll probably put it in the show notes. So yeah, we left off in part two talking about the PSP and the PlayStation Vita, and this kind of leads into the other big handheld, because the PlayStation Vita and the 3DS kind of came out at similar times. I'm pretty sure the 3DS came out. I want to say it came out before the Vita, but I'm not 100% sure. But again, it was one of those handhelds that I got on release day. I don't remember what I did for them. I probably cut grass or something, and I had pre-ordered it because the idea of having because like the big draw of the 3DS was that it had the 3D effect in the screen, so like you could play games in 3D without glasses. Which, if you remember, in that period of time, 3D was a big deal. It kind of tapered out. But like Nvidia was doing like a bunch of 3D gaming. Every big blockbuster release that it was in 3D. It was just like a really big thing. And then Nintendo came out, and Nintendo's always been famous for weird decisions. Uh, but this is one where when they announced it, everybody's like, "All right, this is cool. This is what we wanted to hear." And we get into it, and the handheld comes out, and the launch lineup was not great from what I remember. But after a little while, it got there. I actually don't think that the 3DS had a whole lot in terms of launch, because I remember I want to say I got the 3DS with three games. I got Super Street Fighter 4. I'm pretty sure I got Pilot Wings, and then there was like a Samurai Warriors game that I got. Like those are the three games that I got. And Super Street Fighter 4 was a lot of fun, and the other two games, like Samurai Warriors, was like a fun little distraction. But then Pilot Wings, I picked that up and put it down pretty quickly. Um, I don't think that I really got into 3DS gaming until a little bit later in its lifespan, but I do remember very vividly. I went with two of my friends who had also pre-ordered the system, and we got to GameStop like the morning that the 3DS came out, and it was the GameStop in the mall, and I'll always remember that because we were doing the thing where we parked. We all rode together in one vehicle. We parked in the mall parking lot, and this was way past the time of, you know, these releases being like these. Like this wasn't like a PS2 release event like anymore. This was just like a handful of people were in this store picking up our systems. We get our handheld, and we go out into the parking lot. We take it out of the box, and there was like a little 3D calibration thing, I want to say, and the handheld came with these little AR cards where you would scan the camera. Like you would scan these cards in the 3DS's camera, and like little effects would come up. It was dumb, but it was cool at the same time. And we went back to my friend's house, and we just played the 3DS all day. Uh, I I don't remember what my friends got on their 3DSs. but I just remember I played Super Street Fighter 4 all day, and I played a little bit of Samurai Warriors, but those are like the two main games that I played. And what I remember about Super Street Fighter 4 was it felt like a full experience, which was not the norm at the time. For the DS had a lot of great games on it, but none of them were equivalent to console experiences, like kind of how the PSP and the Vita did, fairly good at when they when they fired, they fired. And Super Street Fighter 4 was that game. And I remember taking my 3DS to school the next day, and everybody was like, "Oh, I can't believe you got this thing." And then they saw the 3D effect, and they just got it immediately. And then one of my friends who was a big Street Fighter fan, he's like, "Great, now I've got to get this thing because it had a portable version of Street Fighter 4." And as we get into before we get into it, that the 3DS had these amazing features that Nintendo kind of abandoned, and to this day it makes me mad because Street Pass was, excuse me, such an incredible thing. It was, if you didn't have a 3DS, or you just don't know about it, if you just don't remember Street Pass, basically you'd have your 3DS in your pocket or your backpack, and and when you would pass somebody else that had a 3DS, you would get a notification. And once you got that notification, you could go in and you could see who you passed. And there were these little games built into the 3DS that you could play. Like there was one that you would collect puzzle pieces and you would trade with other players that had other puzzles. And as you completed puzzles, you get these cool little artworks. Uh, there was one that I don't remember, but then there was it was like an RPG kind of where you would go and you would, as you pass the people, you would get more battle fighters to go through this dungeon, and you would just keep going as you would just keep going and going and going until you rescued your little character. And if I remember right, the really cool thing about it was you would, if you passed with somebody more than once, if you passed the same person and they had that character, like the same person, I'm mumbling. I don't know. If you pass the same person that you have passed with previously, then you would level up that character, and it would go on like that, and you would keep going. And I think even when you finally rescued your me avatar, I'm pretty sure you would still have, like, it would just, the run would restart. So like it was this continuous gameplay loop. And having that feature in college was a completely different experience because there were so many 3DSs on campus. So like I would carry my 3DS around with me all day, and then eventually I would get to the point where I would get in my car at the end of the day and I would have like 30 different me avatars to go through and play all these adventures with. And it was just something that I cannot believe Nintendo fumbled and did not take that to the Switch generation, because the Switch is a great console and it isn't as handheld. I'll grant that, but I mean, if you got cargo pants, you could at least have, you put a Switch Lite in there. Um, and even if the Switch isn't as portable, I would still argue that I mean, the Street Pass should be at least a feature. I would put that thing in my backpack and take it with me everywhere I went if I could have Street Pass on my Switch. But we're not talking about the Switch yet. We're gonna talk about the 3DS today, and when we're done with 3DS, I'm gonna see what we're doing time wise, and we'll go from there. So, uh, just starting with the 3DS, we had remakes of two of the most influential Nintendo 64 games. We had remakes of Ocarina of Time 3D and Majora's Mask 3D. Now, as somebody that had a Nintendo 64, I never had those two Zelda games, but I had a friend and I went over to his house all the time and we played a lot of Ocarina of Time, but not really too much of Majora's Mask. And these two games were, it was just so cool to have them in a handheld format. And I'll always remember my parents worked for a sign company, it's the company I work for now, and they had these shows where we would go out of town for like a weekend. And I remember getting back Sunday morning and having this extra money in my pocket, and like the first thing I thought was, I want to drive to Sulphur, which is like a 15-20 minute drive, to pick up this copy of Ocarina of Time 3D. I go over, I buy the game, I come back, put it on my 3DS, and it was just I was lost in the experience because it was my first time having physically owning a copy of this game. I had never owned it before, and they had updated the graphics on the 3DS to make it look a little bit better, and they had also reworked a few of the things. I think the most famous one was that they had fixed the water temple, and yeah, I just went through and I really went balls to the walls, just playing this game every chance, every opportunity that I had, and eventually I beat it, and it was one of those moments where like I could see not only could I see that why this is one of the most influential, one of the best games at the time, and one of the highest rated games to this day, but also I saw how gaming has evolved and why Ocarina of Time didn't necessarily stand up to modern gaming standards. And while I have Majora's Mask on the 3DS, I never really beat it. Like I never got to the point where I beat the game, and that's one of my gaming regrets. If I'm being 100% honest. Uh, and speaking of gaming regrets, there was another Zelda game. It was a Link Between Worlds. I never beat that one either, but I remember everybody talking about it. And one of these days, I'm going to go back and play these games. Probably for when I actually do the retrospective dive into games I've missed. Uh, but you want to talk about games that I really did put a lot of time into is the Fire Emblem games that came out on the 3DS. So I talked about how I started with the Fire Emblem games before on the Game Boy Advance, and I played one of the game. No, there was only one GameCube game, but I never played the Wii sequel. Uh, and I think there was one Fire Emblem on the DS. I think it was a remake of the one with Martha in it. It was called Shadow Dragon, I think. And the game that really shot Fire Emblem in the arm was Fire Emblem Awakening. I remember when that game came out, everybody freaked out. It reviewed very well. The characters were really good in it, and I want to say like there's a lot of them. People always make fun of Super Smash Brothers for having a lot of Fire Emblem characters, but a lot of those Fire Emblem characters came from Awakening because it was such a good game. And as I'm talking about it now, I really feel like I'm going to end up going back to play this game. It was a really good Fire Emblem. It was a fantastic story. The gameplay was incredible. And this might have been the first Fire Emblem that gave the option to turn off permadeath. I know a lot of people they don't like the turning off permadeath. I personally like it because excuse me, I don't like having to restart a level if my character dies and I like the character. And it might make me like people know that I'm not very good at video games, but I just love them. And I'm pretty sure this is the first game that lets you turn that off. And then they did something different with the next Fire Emblem game in the series. It was called Fire Emblem Fates, and the two main ones, I think it was Birthright, Conquest were the two, I think. And then if you beat both of those, you could get a third campaign called Revelations, I think. But basically, the way this game worked, where there were a handful of missions, or it might have just been one or two missions, I don't know. But at the end of those opening missions, you got this choice, and the choice dictated which campaign you would get. And basically, you chose one of two factions, and the campaigns were wildly different from what I remember. And then the third campaign was like, I think it was like basically you chose, but like you basically got the best of both worlds, and you got to have characters from both campaigns. Uh, Not every character from both campaigns, but like a handful of them. And it was like a really different thing at the time, and it worked a lot better because of the 3DS had the digital game store on it, and there was another Fire Emblem game on the 3DS called Shadows of Valentia, I think is what it's called, and it was a remake of one of the older Fire Emblem games. But I didn't really care for that one as much because it was just Awakening and Fates were like such steps forward for the Fire Emblem franchise, and then Shadows of Valentia felt like, it was a remake of an old game, so it felt like a step back. So I never really played that one, and it was, if I remember right, that game was like like at the tail of the 3DS life cycle. Uh, but then another Super Mario 3D World, that was another big game, and that was the game that really pushed the 3D to its. Uh, it really pushed the 3D aspect of the 3DS because a lot of people just turned that off, and a lot of developers for 3DS they had the 3D aspect in there, but 3D World was made with the 3D effect in mind, and it shows. Like you get obviously you play with it off, you can play any of these games with 3D effect turned off, but 3D World was just a complete different, like it was a completely different animal all on its own. And I'll never forget getting to, I'll never forget getting to that moment of playing the game, and that was like the very first time where I really did see the potential of the handheld. It was a full, 3D Mario experience. Not so much a 3D experience. It was like a not like a 3D experience in the vein of like Galaxy or Sunshine or 64, but it was like levels in 3D. It was such a cool concept. Then you get into Super Smash Brothers being it was the first handheld version of that game. Matter of fact, I remember getting to my college campus really early and getting onto their Wi-Fi. I can't remember how I did it because they had one of those login screens, and I don't think 3DS played nice with those. But I got on the Wi-Fi, I plugged my 3DS into the wall, and I just started downloading this game. And I want to say around like 8 or 9 o'clock, it was done. And playing Super Smash Brothers in the palm of your hand was just not a thing that was like people didn't expect that. They weren't really. It just wasn't a thing that people ever thought would be a possibility because like it was never a thing on the DS. Uh, and I remember playing the absolute crap out of that game. And I even want to say I know I did it for Ultimate on the Switch. I remember when Ultimate came out, I had planned a party for Ultimate like maybe like a week after the game came out, and I marathoned it, playing it as much as I possibly could to unlock every single character in that game. And I want to say we did a like a little LAN party where we just got a bunch of 3DSs in the room. And we played a bunch of Super Smash Brothers, and I mean that was just a next level thing for me. And talking about next level, you look at Pokemon, all the good Pokemon. I know a lot of people don't like X and Y. I loved X and Y. Uh, the region wasn't as interesting as other entries in the franchise, but I loved the Pokemon in X and Y. Greninja is one of my favorite starters of starting Pokemon of all time, coming from Froakie. You had what else did you have? You had Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby, which were remakes of obviously of Ruby and Sapphire. And I think that those games next to Emerald are the best. Like I would never say, "Hey, go back and play Ruby and Sapphire." I would say, "Do Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby." Or if you want the baseline best Pokemon game of all time, you look at Emerald. Uh, and what I really enjoyed about those games were the Mega Evolutions. And again, you want to look at things that Nintendo kind of just left in the rear view. Mega Evolutions were the last great Pokemon mechanic. All these modern Pokemon games, they've got the Dynamax raids and the Z moves or whatever they were in Sun and Moon. Just they were never anywhere as cool as you know as the Mega Evolutions, and that ties right into Sun and Moon, and then Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. I didn't like those games at all. I mean, honest with you, I know some people love Sun and Moon. I hated it. I thought that it was cool that they were trying something different, but it just wasn't something different that I wanted at all. And I kind of just passed those games by. But you look at some of the other games in the system. There was a fully fledged Kingdom Hearts game in Dream Drop Distance. There was a remake of Star Fox 64 that was really good, called Star Fox 3D. Ghost Recon Shadow Wars. I really, really liked that game. Project X Zone 1 and 2, which those were games that kind of tied together Capcom franchises and then like some of their Bandai Namco games into like a turn-based tactics adventure. So like you had Resident Evil characters and Mega Man and Phoenix Wright, and I think characters from the Tales franchise and Tekken were in there, and just something that I wish they would do more of. You had Portal Luigi's Mansion. No, yeah, you had a Portal Luigi's Mansion 1 on there, and then Luigi's Mansion 2 originally came out on there, and then it just recently got ported to the Switch. Uh, Mario Kart 7, that was such a big deal. Again, we had Mario Kart on the Game Boy Advance and Mario Kart on the DS, but this game felt like it was just a different beast because the graphics were incredible. You had the 3D effect. You had, I think this might have been I don't remember, but I think this might have been the first game where you could customize the carts. Um, I think this was definitely the first game with the gliders and like the wall driving mechanics. Yeah. Oh, Animal Crossing. We can't not talk about Animal Crossing. Uh, this game was the first Animal Crossing that I really got into, and I was playing it every single day. But we won't talk about Animal Crossing. My Animal Crossing addiction did not really come into power until I got to Animal Crossing New Horizons on the Switch. We'll get that. We'll probably get into that on part four. Bravely Default. That was a game that infuriated me to no end. So if you don't remember Bravely Default, it was a turn-based RPG made by Square Enix, and people were really excited about this because there hadn't been a turn-based Final Fantasy in a long time at this point. By the t- by this time, we were probably looking at uh, we were probably at Final Fantasy 15 at this time, and the last turn-based Final Fantasy was 10. So people were really stoked about this game. Everybody was talking about it, and then we get to it, and Bravely Default comes out. It kind of reminded me of Golden Sun because you had to go to these four different. There's like these four different dungeons, and I can't remember what the MacGuffin was, but I'm gonna. I'm not gonna spoil what happens basically. But after you get the four MacGuffins, the game kind of starts over, and you loop back to the beginning. But obviously, things scale with your characters. Like your characters are still leveled, and the game scales with you. But I just remember playing this game and getting so frustrated because you have to do the loop over and over and over again. Granted, the loop is faster every time because not only are you leveling up, but you're also you're learning what are the fastest ways to get there. And I'm pretty sure you get like an airship to get you around to the areas faster. But at the same time, it was just one of those things where I don't even remember how many. I think it's like five loops or something insane like that. But it's one of those things where I need to go and play Bravely Default 2. That's something I just need to do. Uh, there was a Kid Icarus game that was on the 3DS that people really loved, but the controls were super bad on it. What else am I missing here? I think that's like the main games that like I really got into on the 3DS. Uh, obviously, there were other games on the system. Like there were, uh, I'm honestly blanking on what they were, but I've been looking into going back and finding a 3DS so I could play some of these games because there was just so many good memories with the 3DS, and I don't think I will never stop wanting to know to bring back Street Pass, but there I feel like I'm missing something. I really do. Um, there was emulation on 3DS. I forgot about this. Uh, First off, there were I want to say it was called the Ambassador Program because the 3DS comes out right, and they lowered the price like very quickly after the 3DS launched. And there's actually you should go check out Reggie Fils-Aimé's book. he talks about the 3DS coming out and then dropping the price, and really he talks a lot about Nintendo stuff in general. It's a very good read, and to offset the people that had already bought the 3DS, they had what was called the Nintendo Ambassador Program. I think that's what it's called, and it gave like 20 GBA and then I think it was like 20 NES titles. And some of these games were games like Excite Bike and the original Super Mario Brothers. I remember Metroid Fusion was one of the games. Fire Emblem Sacred Stones was another one, and I don't remember the other ones. But I just remember it was cool because I had a, like it was really good to like make my 3DS's home screen feel a little bit more fleshed out. Um, but then later on, they started to add more games. Like I want to say all the Game Boy. I know for sure Red and Blue and Yellow were on the Virtual Console, and Silver, Gold, and Crystal might have been put on there as well. There were some SNES games, but for some weird reason, you could only play them if you got the new Nintendo 3DS, I think that was really when they started to do a lot of the iterations. Like they did that with the Switch, where you had the Switch Lite, the Switch OLED, and then with the 3DS, they had the 2DS. Okay, no, no, no. They had the 3DS and they had the 3DS XL, which was just a bigger version of the 3DS. Then they had the 2DS, which was a really cheap way to get into the handheld, whereas I think it was like $80, but the thing was ugly as sin. Then you had the new 3DS, which had a C stick on it and like slightly upgraded power. And it was like I think you could only play like the remake of Xenoblade Chronicles they did on there. You could only play it on the new 3DS. And then they also had the oh yeah, I had the C stick already. It was like a little crappy third stick, and they had like you could play Earthbound on there, which is really cool, and like other SNES games on it. And then of course, they had the new 3DS XL. Oh, speaking of the second stick, I forgot about the Resident Evil games. I remember Resident Evil Mercenaries coming out, and me being super excited for it because the graphics were incredible. But I remember the game coming out, and it just was not good. But what was good was Revelations, which was a game that came out, and I think in my head canon, I always thought this game came out after Resident Evil 6, but I'm pretty sure it came out before. Resident Evil Revelations is a fantastic Resident Evil game. The enemies are kind of crap, but I actually just rebought this game on Steam, and I played it on my Switch like right before I got the Steam Deck. But yeah, this game was just fantastic. Revelations was a game that I played a lot of. I remember beating the game on an airplane and then diving into the raid mode, which was like a new version of Mercenaries, kind of. And I mean, just a real banger of a Resident Evil game. I still think about it to this day. It had this really weird episodic format, but it was the perfect return to survival horror while also having those action elements that Capcom thought people wanted. Um, but yeah, that was the 3DS, man, and it was a handheld that it came out right before the Switch. The life cycle of this handheld ended right before the Switch came out, and we're gonna get into the Switch on part four, and we're gonna talk about how everything that the Switch did. Basically, what I'm saying here, the Switch walked so that handheld PCs could run. That's where we're gonna end things today, guys. Part four, we're gonna dive into the Switch, and I guess we're gonna have a part five, honestly. And part five is gonna delve into handheld gaming PCs. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.